This week on YCN Vermont Wrap, we'll take a look at a few of the top news stories from the past week, and then we'll head to Montpelier, where we'll join Republican State Representative and House Minority Leader Don Turner, who represents Chittenden's 10th District and is vying to become Vermont's next Lieutenant Governor. And on this week's Political Potpourri segment, we'll continue our conversation about Republican gubernatorial candidate Keith Stern and take a look at some of the highlights of the interviews Stern has given over the past several months. One of the key reasons this campaign is on a crash and burn trajectory? His campaign leadership. I'll introduce you to the woman leading his campaign, the same woman who just happens to be seeking a political position of her own in the state of New Hampshire. YCN Vermont Wrap is on now. Come on, let's go have some fun. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. This past Wednesday, Vermont Governor Phil Scott held a press event outside of the Department of Labor headquarters in the capital city, touting an uptick in the state's workforce numbers, but not going as far as to call it a declaration of success. According to the governor, employers in the Green Mountain State have added roughly 4,500 employees to the labor force since the start of the year, bringing the number of employed people to right around 349,000, which is said to be the highest since early 2011. Now, since taking office in 2017, Governor Scott has emphasized the need to increase the state's workforce population, which has been steadily shrinking over the past several years. Now, that's quite the coincidence, that considering that, as I and numerous other people have said many, many times before, the state's #1 export is human beings. But hey, maybe the new Starbucks will generate a sufficient number of jobs to warrant a measurable uptick in the employment statistics. Yeah, the new Starbucks. Yeah, the one that's going in Rutland? Oh, you didn't hear about that one. Oh, yeah. That's the one that's going into the old space that once housed the Rutland Royals Hearthside restaurant. Yeah, they're tearing down the building that one historical society says was built in 1900. The other one says it was built in 1800. But hey, they're going to tear down a historical structure to put in a Starbucks. Because, you know, social justice coffee companies with acidic, overpriced coffee and soy lattes really add a touch of class to every community they open up in. And speaking of beverages, if you have children that attend the Grafton Elementary School or the Warren Elementary School, you may want to send them off to be educated with a Venti regular from Starbucks or a can of soda, or anything to prevent them from drinking the school's water. Because according to the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation, the two elementary school water systems tested positive for elevated levels of per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS. Now, for those of you that have accused me of being a dim-witted conservative, or as Lelio wrote in his comments several weeks ago, a quote, illiterate conservative liar of the facts, notice I was able to say per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances not once, but twice, and without error. See? Proved you wrong yet again. But I digress. Grafton School Superintendent Chris Pratt says officials are doing everything they can to resolve the situation. All teachers and parents, he said, have been notified. When YCN Vermont Wrap returns, we're heading to Montpelier, where we'll speak with Republican State Representative and House Minority Leader Don Turner, who currently represents Chittenden's 10th District and is vying to become Vermont's next Lieutenant Governor. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. With the state's primary election less than 2 weeks away, political races in Vermont are in quasi-full swing. According to Republican State Representative Don Turner, who has spent the past 7 years as the state's House Minority Leader, affordability and economic growth are the key issues that Vermonters face. Turner maintains that between costs associated with housing, utilities, health care, taxes, fees, and childcare, living in Vermont is unaffordable for many and becoming unaffordable for many more. Representative Don Turner joins me from the Capitol Plaza Hotel in Montpelier. Don, thank you so much for joining me on YCN Vermont Wrap.
Thank you very much for having me on the show, Keith.
My pleasure. And, going through your legislative record here, looking over really the past 5 years of your voting history, looks like what we've got here, and certainly what Chittenden District 10 has, is a pretty strong fiscal and social conservative as well. Tell me your thoughts on your voting record.
Yeah, so I have been very solid on my voting record, and I'm a very strong fiscal conservative. I have many family members and friends around the state who struggle every day just to pay their water bill, sewer bill, and taxes. And I've worked really hard in my term in the legislature to fight against these and to hopefully make Vermont more affordable for future Vermont generations.
I've said on the program many times that the number one export in the state of Vermont, it's not lumber, it's not maple syrup, it's not dairy products, it's people. What does Vermont need to do? And you're running as lieutenant governor. So what would you be looking to do as lieutenant governor of the state of Vermont? How would you work with the governor to try to increase the attractiveness of the state of Vermont, to get people to move here, to get people to incubate businesses here, to keep people here?
Well, there's a lot of things that need to be done. And as you said, Keith, I'm running for lieutenant governor of Vermont because I have many years of experience in my local community and in Montpelier in leading groups. I led the fire and rescue departments for years as chief, and now I'm the town manager. In my time in Montpelier, I've come to find that there are too many regulations, too many fees, too many taxes, too much government is not good and not good for Vermont. So one of the things that I will work hard with the governor is to keep pushing back on these increasing costs or growing programs that we can't afford, adding regulations that don't appear on the surface to cost more, but do actually cost Vermonters more. So I'll work very closely with Governor Scott in holding back on raising taxes and increasing fees, but I also want to focus on education. We spend a lot of money in Vermont on education, and I want better student outcomes for our kids. We have so many people that are leaving this state because they can't find jobs. And some of that, I think, can be attributed to coming out of school not prepared for adult life or their life in general. I want to work with schools and school districts and the governor to help kids come out of school prepared to take on these trades. We have people that can't hire plumbers or electricians. Those carpenters, those are jobs that are well-paying jobs that just almost nobody is going into today. So I can spend my time. I come from a trades family background. My father's a builder. I've worked closely with electricians and plumbers and heating and ventilating people all my life. Those are good jobs, good paying jobs, and we've got to figure out a way to prepare students coming out of school, high school, to go into those fields. So there's one area that I'll focus on.
I'm glad you brought up the topic of education because certainly it's become a hot button topic in the state of Vermont. A lot of people saying that the education system is broken. We've got this monstrosity known as Act 46. What do we need to do in the state to make, number one, education a quality product that's being delivered faithfully to the students who are attending public schools? And how do we do this and make this affordable? I mean, from a budget standpoint, it's out of control.
Right. So we have some challenges in Vermont to face for sure. We have a very high cost education system. Some of that is attributed to our rural setting. Act 46 I supported, and I know I've been criticized in the past for supporting that. We're in the final stages of implementation of that bill, and I think that the education system is forever changing and needs forever. Every legislature needs to look at education and how we're going to improve it. But when I'm elected lieutenant governor, I will focus on some of the positives that have occurred in the past with consolidation around the state. But we also have to look at people that are paying the bills, and student outcomes have to weigh into that. I want our kids in Vermont graduating in the top of the classes. I want them to move on and have great careers, not only in college-bound kids, but also in the trades. So we're going to take and look at our system from a different perspective, I think, and we have to look at the whole system, the entire system, and that means we spend a lot of money pre-K through 12. We need to figure out how to blend that in a little bit more, maybe more money in early education prior to kindergarten, and then maybe more into state-run colleges. So I'm looking at a system that continues to provide a good education that remain the hearts and souls of our communities, but also the students coming out of those schools are much more prepared for working and living and making a living in their careers.
We need to take a quick break. When YCN Vermont Wrap continues, more of my discussion with House Minority Leader and candidate for Vermont Lieutenant Governor Dawn Turner, right after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. Joining me from the Capitol Plaza Hotel in Montpelier is Vermont House Minority Leader and candidate for Vermont Lieutenant Governor Dawn Turner. Representative, again, thank you for joining me on the program today.
Thank you very much for having me, Keith. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your viewers.
My pleasure. Now, talking about education continuing, with approximately between trade colleges and schools, there's, I think it's 17 trade education centers in the state of Vermont that average about 55 to 60% occupancy. What do we need to do to steer more people away from useless four-year college degrees like gender studies, for instance, and get them into trade schools that can teach them valuable job skills in the trades, whether it's drywall, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, commercial truck drivers, carpentry, plumbing. I mean, these are trades, these are jobs, these are great careers. With a certificate and a little bit of apprenticeship time, you can make $75,000, $80,000 a year. That's a good living in the state. Do you think that we need to focus more on trade education and less on the traditional four-year college education?
I think we have to balance that, Keith. I too agree with you that we need to start earlier in the education system talking about the importance of these trades and how these are quality jobs and they provide great livings for people that are in these professions. So I think it's an education process that needs to start earlier in a student's education. We generally don't talk about the trades until we get toward VOTEC, and that's 10th, 11th, 12th grade from my experience. Maybe we need to start talking about and supporting and promoting these trades earlier in the education process. That'll be something that I'll be working throughout the Department of Education, working with the governor. And for the viewers that weren't aware, the governor last year proposed allowing people in the military, when they leave the National Guard or military and have experience in these trades, to get their licenses to work in Vermont, utilizing that experience they have in the military. So that's a step in the right direction from my perspective.
Representative, we have about 3 minutes left. I wanted to ask you about Attorney General T.J. Donovan. Recently, he's been on I don't want to call it a public relations tour, but I'll call it that for lack of a better term, touting his successes with bail reform and also seeking the opportunity to make it easier to expunge the criminal records from what are considered low-level offenders. What are your thoughts, number one, on bail reform and also on the ability of the Attorney General or the judicial system in the state of Vermont to expunge the records of what they're considering low-level offenders?
You know, I think that there is merit to some of these changes that have been made. However, I think people should be held accountable for their actions. If somebody created a serious offense, I think they should be held responsible for that and accountable for that, and allowed to be have restitution, move forward with their life, but it shouldn't be removed from the record. That's part of who that person is and what they did. I know there's a movement to try to forgive everything that everybody did was an accident. I'm tolerant to that, I'm open to that, but I still think there's a fine line, and I don't think that a lot of these offenses that they're talking about should be expunged, and I think that bail reform is important, but people, when they create or have a serious infraction of the law, should be held accountable to the standard that is on the law, is applicable today.
Representative, we're just about out of time, but one last observation. During the first question, you had mentioned that you look forward to working with Governor Scott if you were elected. Foredrawn conclusion that Governor Scott's looking at being reelected and getting another term in the governor's chair? I hope
so, Keith. From my perspective, Governor Scott has done a lot of positive things. I do not agree with the governor on all issues, and I have told him that, and he knows that, and if you look at my voting record, people will see that. But I believe that this governor has done more good for Vermont in the last 2 years than the last governor did in his entire 6. He is moving away from tax increases, double-digit cost of living in this state. So I think Governor Scott has done a lot of good things. I don't always agree with him, but I hope and I will be supporting the governor in this election.
Vermont House Minority Leader, State Representative Donald Turner, I want to thank you so much for being a part of the program this weekend. Have a great weekend, and best of luck to you in the campaign.
Thank you very much, Keith. I look forward to coming on the show again.
Love to have you back, sir. Thank you. When YCN Vermont Wrap returns, we'll take a closer look at the Keith Stern for Governor campaign, and specifically at those who are running it. We'll be back with more YCN Vermont Wrap right after this. Welcome back to YCN Vermont Wrap. I'm Keith Hanson. In last week's edition of Political Potpourri, we discussed the efforts by White River Junction greengrocer and political novice Keith Stern to become your next governor. Now, you may recall that I referred to Stern's campaign as a train literally heading off the rails. I also predicted that Stern's performance in a debate aired on Channel 17 would be an embarrassing spectacle. And like most things political, I was dead nuts on. Now, I want to show you exactly what I based my prediction on. On a local cable access program, Bennington Unwrapped, host Chris Bates sat down with Keith Stern this past May to discuss his vision for a Stern Vermont. Now, one of the questions involved was asking Stern to highlight his plan for cleaning up the water in the state, specifically referring to the recent rash of PFAS and PFOA contaminations. Here's the highlight from that dialogue.
Because you're into the clean water, right? You want clean water.
Oh, absolutely.
So how are we in Vermont, and how is you as the governor going to be able to attack that and keep our water clean when the federal government's cutting money to all the states just for that?
Right. That's a good question. I mean, I'll have to talk to experts and figure out a plan, because I'm not getting any briefings on how to address it right now.
Now, just from the outsider looking in perspective, it seems that Stern defers to the experts pretty often, and that he doesn't get any briefings on much. Well, more on that later. Towards the very end of this interview, Stern was asked how he planned to reverse the trend towards the mass exodus out of the state, and how he planned to bring new businesses and incubate business development in Vermont. Here's the highlight from that question.
The big giant stores are not coming here.
Right.
The car manufacturers are not coming here. So what do you tell these kids?
It needs a new out-of-the-box thinking.
Right.
So.
That's my plan.
Got it.
One thing is tort reform. I haven't really been talking about it a lot because it's a little complicated, but
Right.
It's a little complicated. A little complicated. Please, please. Oh, master of the green grapes, purveyor of the parsley, salesman of the salad components. Explain to me and the rest of these puny-minded people who watch my show what the finer parts of tort reform are. In fact, I'm going to challenge you to tell us exactly what a tort is. And a hint, it's not a dessert pastry.
It is complicated.
yes, it is.
You know-
it's completely different from anything you've heard before.
Right.
But what I want to do is, take it to colleges and have the students take and test run it and see how it works compared to what we have now. And if it works, it'll save a lot of money. It could bring pharmaceutical
Hold that
companies.
thought.
Oh, dear God, the stupid, it burns. It's completely different from anything you've heard before. Well, maybe, and I'm going to go a little dangerously far out on that proverbial limb here. Maybe it's because it's something so completely outlandish and outrageous that no legitimate lawmaker would entertain a concept so outlandishly fantastical and, dare I say, nonsensical. But I don't want to underestimate you, so please, consider this a formal invitation to come on this program or my radio program and educate me, my viewers and listeners, about the subject using your vast knowledge and complex understanding of tort law. Now, I want to clarify a couple of things. Yes, I'm snarky and I'm sarcastic in my delivery style. I get that. And I do this for a reason. First, those who rightfully deserve to be pissed off get even more shined on by my attitude. And those who recognize the dysfunctionality of those who I make subjects of my monologues appreciate the fact that I unapologetically dismantle those who need to be exposed. Now, in the last episode, I told you that I, in fact, felt as though Stern was a decent man who wanted the best for his family and his business. I don't blame Stern for this debacle. I give him credit for having the balls to take on such a seemingly unsurmountable long shot. But now, I need to introduce you to the woman who has not only destroyed the credibility and the campaign of this man, but has literally turned him into a caricature and a punchline. She's also managed to convince him to stay in the race so she could continue to receive over $50,000 in management fees. This screenshot from Stern's campaign page, dated May 10th, Stern, or someone posting on his behalf, writes, and I quote, "Well, folks, I've literally put my money where my mouth is for this campaign. I've used money for my retirement to fund this campaign." Now, a quick check of the Vermont Secretary of State website certainly substantiates this claim. Between December 6th of last year and July 3rd of this year, Stern has put over $47,000 of his own retirement money, as he claims, into this initiative. Now, a check of the same website shows expenditures totaling over $46,000 in administrative expenses and consultation fees to a company called Many Streams LLC. Many Streams LLC is the purported media and marketing consultation company owned by Rebecca Bailey, or Becca Bailey, of Haverhill, New Hampshire. The same Becca Bailey serving as his campaign manager. The same one who's seeking to become a state rep in New Hampshire representing Grafton County 15. This is the same Rebecca Bailey that while Keith Stern is walking the campaign trail in parades literally by himself, she's collecting $6,700 a month to spend her time not campaigning for him, but in her own race for state representative in the state of New Hampshire. That's going to do it for this week's edition of YCN Vermont Wrap. Thanks to State Representative Don Turner for joining me on the program this week. I also want to extend a sincere thank you to Capitol Plaza Hotel and Conference Center in downtown Montpelier for hosting our filming session in their beautiful facility. And as always, be sure to share your thoughts with me about this week's program. Please make a note of our email, khanson@ycnnow.com. That's khanson@ycnnow.com. Be sure to let me know the city or town that you live in as well. And be sure to follow me on Twitter @RealKeithHanson. That's @RealKeithHanson on Twitter. Have a fantastic weekend, everybody. Talk to you next week.